And that's it. So is there anything you would like to say or cover before we begin recording?
Well, obviously, I'd like to talk about the new one and about some of the other things that I have coming out this
Oh,
year.
of course, yeah, we'll definitely get to do that. We do have questions about that. Um, so like I say, we have about 10 questions for you, but after that, you're free to talk about and
Oh,
this is your
got it.
time. You're free to shop whatever you want, whatever you can or will talk about. That this is free for you. So
Can I
please.
say if I start screaming profanities about Donald Trump?
That's totally fine. This is an academic podcast. As I say too, I had Dr. Wes Robertson on last week, and he does scripting Japan. He's a linguist and a Japanese history specialist. And he said I could say anything, and I said, well, as long as it's true, and two, you have to think of your readership. So if let's say your readership is children, and you're busy saying, oh, go fuck yourself, well, it's an education. They'll certainly learn something, but you're free to say and do as you like, which is part of the joy. Well, part of the joys and the suckage of not being sponsored or not receiving any cash for this. Mark and I do this on our own time because we are tired of people like Joe Rogan and all these other folks who just say whatever and they get all these sponsorships merely for the popularity of it. So if you want to say fuck Donald Trump, you are more than welcome to. As I say, I really don't care about the comments. I don't care about his fan base or whatever you want to call them. I have so many words muted on social media that I almost never see any news regarding him. I did see the thing that happened yesterday, though, with the
Oh, with the brilliant putting it on Signal, yeah.
who has that in a group chat. I just don't know, like, why would you put national defense in a group? Anyway, there's no sense. There's no sense. And this is why I don't look at it
The,
because
the speculation that I've seen that makes the most sense is that they were doing it so they would be unofficial and not be archived anywhere.
interesting. Okay, I guess that makes sense in a weird kind
Makes
of way.
some anyway, but I mean, to a stupid person, it makes sense. But
I I don't agree with it, but I hear it. I don't
yeah,
understand, but yes, that does make sense. But
you know,
why would
I
you do
I
it?
have no idea whether this is actually true, you understand, but that is speculation I've seen.
I don't think there's anything we can do now except speculation because nothing makes sense anymore. It's just the silly bus all day, every day.
Well,
And
it's always, better to speculate than never.
that's a great one. Keep that one. That's fantastic. Okay, so would you like to clap yourself in, or do you want me to prepare?
You could say, here is this moron. What is he going to do now?
You know what? I'm just gonna leave that in. Ladies and gentlemen, here is this more.
Thank you. Not even marching.
I think this person needs absolutely no introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, the wonderful, the
You have
delightful.
to tell me who I am.
But you remember, that's the thing, because you aren't senile yet. So maybe senility is coming, but as of this moment, you still produce books, and therefore, I don't think a somewhat sane person could produce books
I
with
mean,
such
look at
regularity as you do.
De Kooning's abstracts in his last years. He was still doing it. And he had no more than three marbles to rub together at that point.
But what I think is interesting about you, Harry, is you're an author, a journalist, a historian, obviously a dad, and a cat dad also.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm not
off,
really I'm not really a journalist. I just annoy people on Blue Sky and used to on Twitter.
well, so which one first then? So author, journalist, historian, or cat dad? Which one first? Which one
Uh,
best?
I think the first one that we have to talk about, because without it, my entire life would be different, is that I'm an SF fan. That came first. And, just about everything else sprang from that.
Well, also, I mean, you're married to Laura Francos, who's also an author,
Yes,
whose brother Stephen is also an author,
yes,
and your cousin. has almost the same name as you and also an author.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere in the family. I mean, there are too many authors in your family. You need
Yeah,
to put some
you
back.
know, and my one of my uncles who has a different last name from me because he was my mom's brother
Mm.
was a longtime tech writer. So, you know, yeah, I do. We do words.
And what about your children? Any of your daughters writers? Did you pass the curse
One
on?
of one of them has published.
Oh no.
One of them has written a dissertation, and one of them hasn't. You know, I've got three.
Okay, so you pass the curse on maybe to one. Okay. That's not so bad as numbers go. Do you have, like I said, you have too many authors in your family. You have to weed out some of them. So, but after, I just want to talk a
You're
little
a
bit.
weedy bunch, yes.
We're talk a little bit about your education. So after dropping out of Caltech, good job.
Oh,
Uh,
no, there's a story that goes with this. So
oh,
I'm gonna.
please tell us
All
because
right.
I love dropouts. They're my favorite.
Uh, how did this happen? Okay. I was 14 or 50 years old, and I was in a secondhand bookstore down the street from our house, and I found a copy of L. Sprague de Camp's Lest Darkness Fall.
Great book.
Wonderful fun. And I was utterly fascinated by this because I had read some other decamp and enjoyed it. And this just hit me everywhere I lived. And I started trying to find out how much he was making up and how much was real because I had no idea at the time. I think this was the first time I'd ever heard of the Byzantine Empire, for heaven's sake. And I got hooked. And as you say, when I got out of high school, I got into Caltech and I flunked out of Caltech at the end of my freshman year because A, calculus was tougher than I am, and B, because I had always sailed through high school and you can't sail through Caltech, or I certainly couldn't. I sank like a rock. All right. I spent a year at Cal State LA getting my GPA back up to the point where it was visible to the naked eye, my naked eye, and even more relevantly, since the year in question was 1967, 1968, where it was visible to my draft board's naked eye. I would have made a really lousy soldier. I mean, I'm
Maybe you would have been a good medic.
I might have been a decent medic. I would have been a hell of a clerk typist. But I mean, I was very nearsighted even then. Uh, I'm tall. I'm clumsy. I'm slow. I'm not particularly strong. All the things you want in a fighting man, you know. But anyway, after I got into UCLA to start, my junior year, I kept going until, God help me, I had a PhD in Byzantine history. You want fries with that?
Can you tell
And
us actually about
and
your
this,
PhD?
reading Lest Darkness Fall at an impressionable age marked, screwed up, however you want to call it, my entire life because let's see, because I read that book, I have the degree I have. Because I read that book, I've written most of what I've written. I already was trying to write things, so I would have written something. I already had the bug, but I mean, I might have been David Brin instead of Harry Turtledove. You never can tell. Uh, let's see. I was teaching at UCLA for 2 years while the fellow under whom I studied had a guest gig in Greece. And while I was teaching there, I met the lady that I am now married to because, this again is because I read that damn book at a strategic time. Uh, because I read that book at a strategic time, I have the kids I have. I live where I live. I'm talking to you right now about the silly stuff that I have done over the past nearly 50 years. Other than that, finding Lest Darkness Fall in that secondhand store didn't change my life at all.
No.
I mean, this is alternate history on the micro-historical level. This is the kind of alternate history that makes everybody, understand why alternate history can be a thing, because we all have moments like that where if we'd done A and not B, or if that girl had said yes when you asked her out instead of no, your whole life would be different. You can't help thinking about things like that. So that's how I got where I am.
And can you tell us quickly about the immediate successors of Justinian? Because you have it on your wall back there. But what
Oh,
interested
no,
to know
oh,
about
this
your
no, no, this is Justinian the Second, who is a very different guy. I wrote a historical novel about him because I was translating the Greek Chronicle of Theophanes in grad school and published it. I earn enough for a nice dinner just about every year from it's been in print for more than 40 years. And I can tell you about him or I can tell you about the immediate successors, whichever you'd rather.
yeah, both which because I know the immediate successors
Well,
is your
the immediate
PhD. Yeah.
successors of Justinian are Justin II and Tiberius Constantine, who had to try to hold his enlarged empire together with, excuse me, the diminished resources that he left them and didn't do a very good job of it. Justinian II comes along more than 100 years later. His regnal dates were 685 to 95 and 705 to 711, which suggests that he had an interesting career. But I was translating this chronicle, and in 705, he's trying to come back and retake the throne of in Constantinople, and he's in a little boat on the Black Sea, and a storm blows up. One of his henchmen says, "Lord, promise God that if you have, that if he spares you, you'll have mercy on your enemies." And Justinian looks at his henchmen. You got to have henchmen. Got to have henchmen. And he says, "If I spare even one of them, may God drown me now." And the storm stopped.
Da-dum.
And I was doing this out of Greek into English, and this was, oh God, excuse me, 1972, 73, something like that. And I said, there's a novel in here, a historical. And I tried to write it then, and I didn't have any luck because I didn't quite know what I was doing yet. And 20 years go by, and in the mid 90s, I wrote it and sold it. I've had,
And you won an award for it too.
no, not for this one.
Not for Justinian?
Nope.
Oh, it was the Gladiator. That's right.
Yeah. But, I have had real Byzantinists come up to me and say, I got this book, and I didn't realize who wrote it, because
See your name on it.
no, it's not my name on it. It's a transparent pen name. It's H.N. Turtledove, which is what the name was before my grandfather anglicized it.
So is that true that I read that in an interview you used Turtletove because nobody would believe that your last name was Turtledove? Is that true?
No, that's not quite true. When I sold my first fantasy novel at the end of the 70s, I sold it to a bottom feeder publisher. Oh, they were. Well, it deserved too. They totally were. Oh my God. And they said, we're going to change your name to Eric Iverson because no one will believe Turtledove.
Turtledove is such a boss name though. That's
Well,
fantastic.
at the time, I didn't mind too much because I thought, well, okay, I can use Iverson for fiction and I can use, Turtledove for academic nonfiction, which, and keep them separate. A little while later, I was started. I did put a middle initial in there. It's
Gee.
the G stands for goddamn.
Eric Goddamn Iverson. That's a good
That's
one.
correct.
That's great. So HN though
Oh,
is
well, my real middle name is Norman.
okay.
Uh,
So hell
and
never turtle down.
and then in the mid '80s, just as I was starting to, be known a little bit as Eric G. Iverson, because I was selling to Asimovs, I was selling a lot to Analog, you know, I sold the 4 books of the Videsso cycle to Lester Del Rey.
Hmm.
And Lester told me, if you want us to publish them, we will publish them under your real name because people will remember it. And I said, but I'm just starting to get known as Iverson. And he said, if you want to stay Iverson, we won't publish them. And he had more leverage than I did.
Hmm.
So they became Harry Turtledove and I phased out old Eric G. I may be the only writer in captivity who has had both his pen name and his own name imposed on him by force. But anyway, the reason that Justinian there and some of my other historical fiction by Turtledove, it's late 20th century marketing gimmicks because they don't sell as well as my SF, and I didn't want them to hurt my numbers in the computers.
Yeah.
That's what the deal is.
See, you're the smart man. I am the not smart person who used their real name for everything. A name that sounds fake because my last name is so bland. And they're like, oh, well, why don't you make a thing for your other books? I said, I'm tired. If you're not going to force me to do it, I won't. And I really should have because, as you say, for people who don't know, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made with publishers and writers in terms of how your backlog sells. And so, if certain things don't sell, they'll ask you maybe to change your name or to change an initial or something. So this way, if your
You're
previous books
different
didn't
on the
sell.
computer.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So if this way, if your previous books didn't sell, then these will probably sell a little bit better or something like that. Maybe it doesn't matter too much nowadays.
Sometimes it works spectacularly well. Kate Elliott and Robin Hobb are both pseudonyms and both, in real life, good friends of mine.
But there was something with Justinian. I think it was that they were worried that sales might not
Yes,
be high.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, they knew darn well sales would not be that high.
but they were pretty good.
Uh, they were okay for what it is. I can't think of the last person who got rich writing historical fiction, that's not romances and things.
So clearly, when is the romance coming out, Harry?
Uh, Come on, you've seen me on Blue Sky. You know how my head works by now. It's,
So do
yeah.
you do you write alternate history then as an excuse just to continue your history studies?
No, I write it because it's writing what I know. I mean, I don't know if it's, the interesting part years and years ago now. God, I'm old. Every so often I get reminded of it. I got the idea for Guns of the South, which ended up being the book that let me quit my day job and let me write for a living, tell lies for a living, however you want to put it. Uh, am friends still with the fantasy writer Judith Tarr. Fine, fine writer. And Judy, this was before either one of us had email. And we'd write back and forth. She was in Connecticut then, and I'm on the other coast. And she was doing one of the things that writers do. She was complaining about the cover art for a book she had coming out.
Every time. Every
Yeah.
time.
Oh, yes. And she snarled, "It's as anachronistic as Robert E. Lee with an Uzi."
Oh, well, you had one with an AK-47, so there you go.
And I looked at that and I printed out my answering letter to her and I added a hand scrawled PS on the bottom. Who'd want to give Robert E. Lee an Uzi? Time traveling South Africans, maybe? If I
Oh,
write
yeah.
it, I'll give you an acknowledgement. And I looked at that and I thought, shit, I can do things with that.
It's a great idea.
And I Xeroxed it to make sure I didn't lose the idea because, as I say, this was only on hand scroll. It wasn't anywhere electronic and saved or anything. And I saved it and I spent a year researching and another year writing, and it came out. And when I told my agent about the idea, he said, my God, I can sell this for somewhere between X and Y, you know, which was about 5 times what I was making at the time. And he did too, for right in that range that he threatened. And I thought, okay, I've got 2 years of money saved up. I really hate my day job. I quit. I
What
had
were you working as at the time?
the job title was tech writer at various. I worked for the Los Angeles County Office of Education at various times. I wrote achievement test items. I wrote newsletters. I wrote grant proposals. I proofread. I copy edited. When I was just starting out at the end of the 70s, I was even an emergency, you know, paste up guy with, when that meant rubber cement and an X-Acto knife. Primitive days. There was a room full of people. I was not one of them. I just altered text what I needed to.
So, which period of history have you not written about yet that you would like to do or that you are interested in?
Oh God. I have this 18th century idea, but I don't know that I'll ever know enough to write it. So, all I can do is hope.
Well, the 18th century is pretty long.
Yeah.
Any specifics that you
Um, no, because it's still nebulous. There is an enormous difference, excuse me, between having an idea and having a story,
yes.
as I'm sure you know. And I have idea. I don't have story yet. When I have story, then I can start thinking about what I actually do.
Just throw some more Uzis in it. Maybe a flamethrower. It'll be fine. Or you could just juxtapose 18th century with what's happening in the world now. I don't
You know,
recommend it.
that's actually been done and done very well. There's a story called Mozart in Mirror Shades, where it's then 1980s present is going back into the past to strip mine it, basically.
Makes sense. Where are you
Yeah,
going to get resources from? The
yes,
past.
exactly.
Does it then fracture the timeline though?
Yeah, it's a very strange story, but it's fun. Well,
Speaking of very, very strange stories, let's talk about a bit about all the things you've written. So, Where Night was your first book in
yes,
1979.
yes,
So,
I wrote that in parallel with my dissertation, which made my dissertation run longer than it should have.
so how many books to date? So, I just want to give people an idea if they are not aware of the breadth of the things that you've written. So, we have the Garen the Fox, or the LA Bond series. Then
Yeah,
there's the Dessa cycle,
yeah,
which, and then
it was
there's the
Byzantine.
right? There's the tale of Kipsos,
Yeah,
the Time of Troubles,
yeah,
then there which has many books, and then there's the World War
yeah.
series, then there's the colonization trilogy, Then there are the Coda books. I think there's two of those.
Hmm.
Then the Great War series. Then the
Yeah.
American Empire.
Well,
The,
that's what that all runs together. There's 11 books in there overall
mhm.
that run from the 1880s to the 1940s.
And there's the Settling Accounts. Then there's the Darkness series. So
Yeah.
out of all of these books, how many have obviously probably written more than you published, but how many published so far?
I don't know exactly, counting story collections and things around 110, something like that.
Put some back, Harry. God, save some for the rest of us. It's so annoying when you're such an overachiever.
I am like a slug, as a slug secretes slime, I secrete words. Seems to be how it works.
So, I mean, and this is not to say anything of all the short stories that you've written and published. Do you have an idea of how many of those?
Couple of hundred, I don't know exactly. I mean, that's a WAG.
I think really, obviously it's impressive, but I think what's more impressive is the fact that you've managed to sell this many because there are so many authors, especially nowadays, who, yeah, sure, they write a lot, but even with the state of the publishing industry now, even selling something is so difficult. And I think it's pretty impressive that you've managed to sell this much during your time.
I'm I am amazingly lucky. I am amazed. Look, if you can make a living at this, which I've done for God 34 years now, you've got to be lucky, and I am, and I know it a lot of ways.
So you've won for the awards. You won the Hugo Award for Down in the Bottom Lands in
Yeah,
1994, the Dragon Award for Fallout: The Hot War in
yeah,
2017, and the Prometheus Award was for The Gladiator. But
yeah.
which of your works, maybe not these, but which of your works is your personal favorite?
I never answer that question. It's like asking me which is my favorite kid.
We all know you have an answer, Harry, because we all have an answer to which is our favorite child.
I
We're just
never, I
embarrassed to say.
just because I have it doesn't mean I give it publicly. That's just how that goes.
And and so for the new book, so the new book is Twice as Dead, which is
Yes,
City of Shadows book one, which has
yes.
just come out last week. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So will you please tell us about it and what can we expect from the books in this series? Because it is a series, right?
Yes. There are three sold. The second one is called Lightning Runes and will probably be out next year. And the third one is called The Succulent Succubus and will probably be out year after next, which my God is 2027, and that just seems insane.
We might make it that far.
Well, there's that too, but I just remember when my first kid was born, Laura and I worked out that she would be in the high school class of 2002. And that just seemed so incredible and so unreal. It was the 21st century, and now we're farther away from it on the other side than we were on that side then. So, anyway, Twice as Dead, where it's a an urban fantasy. It's noirish. It's set in Los Angeles in an unspecified date right after World War II. I'm going to write enough of these, I think, that I'm going to need to do the same thing that Patrick O'Brien did. And he was talking about how some of his books, he has more things going on than he has years to hold them. And some of them are in 1812A and some of them are in 1812B. And so, and I'm going to have to do things like that. There's just nothing I can do about it. And my protagonist is a hard drinking detective named Jack Mitchell, who is of mixed race and can be one thing or the other as that is convenient to him, or sometimes as people notice him when it's inconvenient to him. There are vampires and zombies and corrupt cops, because this was a glorious time for corrupt cops in the history of Los Angeles. This is the social milieu of just about the time when I was born. And I heard stuff about this. I was not paying serious attention to it at the time. I was born in 49. And he's looking for missing people. He runs into trouble. He runs into what he thinks is love. And we have a mostly happy ending, mostly. And I hope people have fun. I mean, the people who have seen it so far seem to be having fun with it, which is the point of the exercise. And I get a few licks in.
Would you consider this alternate history, or would you consider it urban
No,
fantasy?
it's not altered. It's fantasy. It's urban fantasy. It
'Cause
is, people are going to call it alternate history because it's not set in our world, and also because I've written so much alternate history, that whenever everything, they have a hammer and everything in mine looks like a nail.
uh-huh. Yeah, once people get it into their heads that something that you do, it's hard for people to
Yeah.
realize that, oh my gosh, you do other things too?
Yes.
Wow,
I
amazing.
know. No, this is this is urban fantasy. That's what it is.
You're often, though, called the master of alternate history or the king of alternate history. What predictions in your books, predictions, or things that you have foretold in your books that have actually come true? And I ask this because on the socials you keep saying, I didn't mean to be topical. I didn't mean to be topical.
Well, if I wrote back around 2002, I think it was, I wrote for the singer Janice Ian a song that was based on a verse from a story that was based on a verse from one of her songs. And the verse that I chose was Stalin was a Democrat. And I thought, how would Stalin be a Democrat? What, what would it take to do that? And what if his parents emigrated while his mother was pregnant with him and he was a native citizen? And in 1932, he's contesting the Democratic presidential nomination against FDR. And what if, while the convention is banging heads, what if FDR has a horrible, unfortunate accident that may not be an accident at all? Joe Steele, which is what he calls himself, has nothing to do with Stalin, of course. No, nothing like that. Becomes president of the United States and stays president of the United States until he dies in 1953. And it is a thought experiment about how you would undermine the Constitution and have a one-man ruler in the White House. And the one thing that I will say about it is that I thought our institutions would be more formidable than they have turned out to be in real life. And it took him longer than it's taking dipshit Donald, pardon my French.
Well, maybe we'll get that alien invasion after all. So I know you had one before World War II. Maybe we'll get one before World War III.
Or maybe we'll just get World War III. You never know.
No, no, please, alien invasion. I'm so tired. Please let them come and become our overlords. I don't want to work anymore. So this new book, Twice as Dead, is a hard, more of a, like you say, it's an urban fantasy, a hard-boiled detective book. Do you find it
Mhm.
more challenging to write alternate history or historiographic metafiction, or do you find it easier to write things like this where you just can have fun and play with things?
It's not just have fun because you have to know what the real stuff is before you can riff on it. I have accumulated a shelf of books about what LA was like, especially what the jazz scene was like. I've riffed on some a real after hours club that was called Brothers is the model for my Deacons, although Deacons is probably fancier than the real place was. Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you need to know the weird stuff before you can riff on the weird stuff.
I have here also, for those who can't see, I have Descending Darkness.
Mhm.
And this is categorized, I would say it's a fantasy, but it's actually, if you look it up in the catalog, it's categorized as a sci-fi. And you
I
once
can't
said,
imagine
yeah,
why. My God, it is absolutely fantasy.
that one of my favorite quotes of yours is that you said that all alternative history is sci-fi in the other direction. And do you really think that there's any difference between fantasy and sci-fi? I ask this because Ray Bradbury, may rest in peace, once said that he categorized his books as fantasy, even though he was the things like Fahrenheit 451 were said to be sci-fi. So how would you categorize your books, and do you really think there's any difference?
Um, it depends on what you do with natural law. If natural law is not changed or is changed in a scientifically plausible way, it's SF. If you change it with magic, it's fantasy. I don't know. I mean, that's
So we hear all the time. I always hear the debate, about Star Wars being, oh no, it's science fantasy. I'm like, it's pretty fantasy. There's
Handwavium.
yeah. I mean, I do agree with you. I honestly think, when people have these wars about space, it's all speculative fiction. I think it's kind of silly to argue about it, especially when, the catalog will go one way and what you feel might go another way completely.
I can't hear you. You've just gone mute.
Oh, how about now?
Nope.
Okay. That's all right. Don't worry. We'll edit it out.
Silence.
Complete silence? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Ah, okay. So it's just an audio blip. Don't worry. We'll edit it out for any reason. Unless you'd like to leave it in. Maybe the ghost took over for a second. Um,
See,
so
that's fantasy.
ghosts are real, Harry. Don't take that away from me. Everything else is so terrible. Don't take by paranormal fiction. Uh, so coming back in, so tell us what you have going on that's coming out next, besides the next two books after Twice is Dead.
I have, okay, things that I know are going to get printed. Coming in May is another fantasy novel from Ethan called City in Chains, which is a fantasy, as I say. It's set in an analog of Paris right before and right after the liberation, and it centers on a junk dealer of the wrong religion and a very vain actor who are doing their best to stay alive, to either collaborate when they can't help it or not collaborate when they can help it with the occupiers and some of the problems that they have doing that. That's coming in July is an alternate history novel called Powerless, which is based on a novelette that I did for fantasy and science fiction a few years ago, also called Powerless, set in a world where the Soviet Union dominates it as thoroughly as in real life the United States dominated in the 90s, maybe more so.
Hmm.
And it's set in the West Coast People's Democratic Republic. And a shopkeeper gets a sign as part of a propaganda campaign, and he unrolls the mailing tube and he pulls the sign out, and it's "Workers of the World Unite," and it's so cliched that he can't stand it. And instead of taping it up in the front window, he crumples it up and throws it in the trash, and everything that follows from that. This is based on an idea that Václav Havel had in his essay "The Power of the Powerless," and that was my starting point for the short fiction and eventually for the novel. Okay, coming also next year is, oh gosh, I don't know if it's going to be next year or year after. But anyway, the other things that I have that I know I've sold are a contemporary alternate history called Don't Breathe, which imagines what COVID would have looked like if it were a 10% killer instead of a 1% killer, and how people still wouldn't want to believe it.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, this book I know is going to, the final edit has not been done on this, and I mean the final edit not by me. They're going, I wrote it at white heat.
you have any
Uh,
doomsayers in there going, God is against the anti-vax, and like them like walking around with the signs on their chests going doom doom.
unclean, unclean. Coming up also is a straight historical novel set in the early to middle 7th century called King of Nowhere, about a Frankish trader named Samo who became the first political leader of the Slavs of Central Europe. And he's one of these characters who's ideal for historical fiction because we know he was real and we don't know much about him.
Oh, the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had fun with that. Also coming up eventually, this again is because I read science fiction, because I was one of the people who was introduced to Jerome K. Jerome's Three Men in a Boat.
Great book.
Yeah, I found out about it the same way Connie Willis did. We found out about it in Have Spacesuit Will Travel, when Highline talks about it. And back in the 90s, I bought a book called The Pretty Women of Paris. What it is it's a reprint of an 1880s guide to the brothels and expensive women, for sale in Paris, with, looks, preferences, whatever. If you like to do this, go to her, that kind of thing.
It's great advertising.
And yeah, apparently in the 19th century, these guides to sporting houses and guides to whores were quite common. All in the uh, anyway. And I thought, and because I am weird, I thought, what if the three men of Three Men in a Boat made a sex tour to Paris in the late 1880s, early
Fantastic.
1880s?
Fantastic.
And so it is done in as good a pastiche of Jerome K. Jerome's style as I could manage, and it's a mystery because there's a murder in a brothel, and one of them gets suspected, and
That's
so
it. That
that's
sounds great. I can't wait for that one.
that was enormous fun to write. That was enormous fun to write. I mean, my indispensable book for that was an 1889 Baedeker's of Paris, you know, which I paid the money for it, by God, it was worth it.
Well, you might as well get your money's worth. Might as well write a book
Yeah.
about it.
No, I mean I got it after I had the idea. I thought this is something I
Oh,
need. Gotta have this.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a real artifact. That's great.
Hmm. So that's what's coming up, and I've got a couple of short stories coming out, and I just had one come out earlier this year that I am really pleased about because it was a cool idea. Um, I got invited into an anthology of monsters in World War II, and I thought, what am I going to do for this? And back in the day when he was on Twitter, I knew Trent Zalozny. This is, of course, before he died, obviously. Duh. I knew Trent, and we got on pretty well. And I asked him, could I have permission if I give you 20% of the story funds to use Konrad Nomikos or Konstantin Karagiosis from this immortal in World War II? And he said yes.
Wow.
And so I did. And I just had that. I love that book. And I hope I did right by it. He liked the story. He sent me an email saying that he liked the story just a couple of weeks before he had his stroke. So too damn young.
Yeah. At least that's amazing that you got permission that he just gave it to you, though. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I was so pleased. As I say, we got on well online, and I mean, this is one of the things online is for, you
Yeah.
know, is making these connections where even a social caterpillar like me can do it. I am not a social butterfly. Anyone who knows me even a little bit knows I am not a social butterfly. I am a social caterpillar. Very often I'm a social pupa.
I always find it odd when you meet authors who are extroverts. I mean, I think it's a special talent
Yes, I do too.
to
I admire John Scalzi tremendously because he's a nice guy. He's an outgoing guy. He's great. I can't do it. I just
no,
can't.
neither
I,
me. I can do this. I could do the one-on-one and
even this
but
is work for me, I'll tell you.
oh, I believe you. Even talking of somebody says, would you tell us about yourself?" and immediately go, "I have to have a nap. I'll be back." I can I completely understand you. Even when you're having a nice intelligent conversation with somebody, it's not
It's
ta
work.
it's yes, it's not taxing, but it's still you still have to present
You
in
know,
a
th
certain way.
there are people, like politicians who are energized by going out in front of crowds.
Oh
And
God.
there are people like me who are drained going out in front of crowds. And I'm, I have always been the sort who needs a couple, 3 days to recover after a con rather than.
That's because I think your energy is spent in writing 600 books a year. That's why you have no energy for anything else.
Mm, I don't know. I have, let's just say I'm not outgoing and leave it there. I never have been.
But I think it's a special superpower to be somebody who can enjoy their own company, essentially. I think especially since we were talking about the pandemic and writing books about it,
Yeah, my,
I
my my lifestyle probably changed less than almost anybody's. I stayed in the house. I wrote. Yeah, that was shocking change.
yeah, exactly. When I saw some people so surprised that authors wrote tons of books during COVID, I thought, what do you think we do the rest of the time? That
Yeah,
that's what happens. It's just now it happened exponentially because people weren't calling us on the phone every 5 minutes.
I wrote. I had started 3 Miles Down, which came out in 2022. I'd started that just before the pandemic hit, and wrote through the pandemic, right, and finishing right in the middle.
And it actually came out really in the middle of the pandemic in 2022. That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing that because the publishers in general uh, were terrified to publish anything during the pandemic because especially
Yes.
at the beginning of the pandemic, books did so poorly
I
because there
know.
was
Nobody,
no
nobody went to bookstores. My
you you
God.
you couldn't. There was no way. Everything was closed. You had to order
Yeah.
online. And so a lot of publishers couldn't cope and couldn't relate. And so instead of focusing on online pre-order sales and things like that, many of them just didn't publish. So many of them even shut down. So that's pretty amazing that you came out with a book in 2022 and it actually did pretty well.
It
It's
did.
not
It did decently. It's close to earning out. So we'll see what the next statement looks like.
speaking of not taxing you too much. I don't want to keep you forever. But I know that I have to ask you because it's really amazing to me. How do you read the daily news cycle? and not want to blow up half the world. I would like to know how you keep such a
Oh, I do
good head
want,
about
I
it.
mean, I do want to blow up half the world. It's just, A, I can't, and B, if I could, somebody would do bad things to me. I mean, this, of all the things I never imagined was that when I was an old man, I would have to watch my country becoming fascist. This is insane.
And I'm amazed that you can watch it because, as I say, I have so many words muted because I get so affected by, I'm not even in your country, and I still get so
Oh,
affected by things that are
you may
happening.
be in a few weeks. You never know.
Good luck trying to take Quebec, Harry.
Yeah, I,
I give it to you.
I am being sardonic, but I mean that maniac in the White House just has no clue.
Yeah, really none. I mean, forget about the War of 1812 and anything else that happened in history. I would love to see them try to raid Quebec again. Because Chateauguay is still there. I live near it, and th things happen there, and they will happen again. I'll tell you that for nothing. So I think it's amazing that you can read the daily news cycle and comment on it actively without becoming I won't say maybe mentally enraged because obviously it is maddening, but I without becoming bitter and at least verbally enraged about it. You make quite
You didn't,
level-headed
s- you,
comments.
well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I was a lot more caustic on Twitter because there were a lot more chuckleheads, he said politely, on Twitter than appear to be on Blue Sky.
I don't know how you do it because I only saw in the last 9 days I've only seen one news story and I have already lost faith. And I give it to you that you have some kind of magic power to not be exceeding, I mean, yes, you're disheartened, but exceedingly despondent about the whole thing, and you're still able to talk about it in a good-humored aspect or a
One
good-humored
of
way.
one of the many wise things that Heinlein said, whether you agree with him politically or not, and I don't, was that it's amazing how much middle-aged wisdom just looks like being too tired, and that's even more true if you're old.
I am 41 and I have gotten to that point, yes. So I understand.
I am 75 and it doesn't get better.
No, it
It's
does not. You heard it here first. It does not get better. So you gotta learn to deal with it. I know you do your I know you do your tongue-in-cheek countdown every day where you say, four years and so to get through.
minus
Uh,
64 days at the moment. Yes.
so if you yeah, I know I've asked you before, but could we just skip a few days a little at a time? No one will notice, but if you just keep skipping a few days, if I think maybe it will give people
If you send
hope.
me the engineering drawings for that, I will be happy to use it.
I think there was one day where you skipped or like 2 days where you forgot to count, and I thought, no, this is good. Just keep forgetting. Just keep skipping ahead by a few days, and eventually we'll get to the end of your 4 years, which will probably be about maybe 100 days off, and people will just feel, oh, think, oh my God, it's over. Is it over? Great. Amazing.
Oh my goodness. It's
Now, Harry,
just,
I
I
wish
mean, the thing is that here in the States, there are so many people who like this stuff, but I just really have trouble imagining. I don't have, what the rest of the world thinks of us. Oh my God.
I was recently in Japan, and it was my first vacation in 11 years, and being there was interesting from a news cycle perspective because news doesn't really they know what's going on, but news doesn't really reach them unless it's in Japanese. Because even though people there do learn English, it's not really a bilingual country, and
That I, yeah.
they don't really pay attention to Western news. But they have a very different aspect on it. So, for example, their major news story there while I was there was the price of rice has gone up by 50%. And this is huge for them because rice is their main staple. And it's led them to eat less rice and eat more bread. Hokkaido makes most of their wheat, so it's fine for them. But there is now a huge anxiety, I would say, about their imports. And that is how they look at it now, is that they see the States as sort of like an import hub. They're not really interested, at least not that I saw, about the US possibly turning fascist. They're interested in the trade. And so the sentiment for the US is actually not that bad because they understand, think they're pretty savvy and they understand that the people have no control over trade union. They don't vote for this. The trade has to do with their leadership. And so too, it's the same when Abe, RIP, when Abe was there and Abenomics, and they didn't really see that much of an effect of Abenomics when he was around. But, there are little blips here and there. So they understand things more, I would say, in a nuanced fashion. And I think that nuance and talking about things in perspective has really died in the West.
Gruesomely.
I have to say, you can't have, I have,
Roadkill. I mean, RFK
yeah.
Jr. wouldn't eat it.
He might if you tell him it causes measles. I mean, but I think that's a thing that we have lost. I once maybe in the West or maybe in North America. I can't really say because I'm not a political pundit, but I've noticed in being in two different parts of the world in the last 3 weeks that there is still that aspect or that level of nuance that exists in certain places that doesn't seem to exist. Maybe it's only online, but that doesn't seem to exist in the West anymore. Whereas we have now, because of things that are happening in the States and in the West in general, people have now become so starkly divided on things
Yes.
that
Oh, yeah.
having an opinion is a crime. And again, we're not talking about political parties, but just having a nuanced opinion about something is seen as not acceptable. Whereas I think it's important to understand that many people, as we say, are not in charge of their governments. And even here in Canada, I'm not in charge of the government. I vote for sure. I'm a voting person. I'm a thinking
Yeah.
person, and I vote in
That's
municipal.
how
But
your election is next month now.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, we now have a snap election for next month because Americans think that we're under some sort of dictatorship where we don't choose our leaders, but we don't. We choose our parties. And the majority party has a leader, and that leader of the party becomes the PM. That's how it works. And so, we can call a snap election at any time. And we don't have to wait for November. We don't have to wait those 4 years. So that is how our democratic process works. But trying to explain this to people, they think that it's some kind of immediate takeover by the liberals. No, this is how it works for anybody. Anybody in power can cause a snap election. It doesn't matter, you know. So it's because government, when I say the words prorogue government, people think I'm probably talking about pierogies. They don't know what to prorogue a government means. So. It is it's a good part of our democratic process, but uh, I can't really. It's difficult for me to explain that to somebody who is so used to going, well, no, you have to wait for the election. You go, well, any side can call an election if they feel like it. It's a huge waste of money if it doesn't turn out if it doesn't turn out the way that a certain party hoped or whatever it is. But an election is a pure democratic process. We don't, I mean, our provincial elections, we could talk about, how it's the same thing with state stuff, how, a state will vote for something, but then the people won't vote for it. Well, you're not voting for the thing, you're voting for the representative who votes for the thing. And you can be disappointed by a representative, absolutely. But I think especially in the East, where especially in places like Korea, where they're currently trying their one of their
Yes.
leaders, they understand that the people are not responsible for the actions of a leader. Yeah, you vote for a party, but you can only hope that that person does the right thing or does the thing that you want them to do. And I think that that's understood in the rest of the world. I don't think many people blame 50% of Americans for what's happening now. You have no control over that. Who has control over a group chat that that leaks? Nobody.
It's interesting because I had sort of an epiphany when I was in Canada for the '94 World Con. My kids were small then, and everybody came. And on Sunday, the last day, the last night of the con was the masquerade. And Laura took our two older girls to the masquerade, and the youngest one was only 5 at the time. And she stayed in the hotel room with me. And as she was getting ready for bed, I was reading her a last story, as we did with the kids. And we were going through the Laura Ingalls Wilder's Little House on the Prairie books, and the one I was reading, the scene I was reading there in Winnipeg was a small town Midwestern 4th of July celebration sometime probably in the 1880s, with the fireworks and with the tub thumping speeches about how we're the freest country in the world and we're the greatest country in the world and we're like this because we kicked the King of England out in the revolution, and it's all so wonderful and we are so great and so patriotic. And I was thinking, here I am reading this to my 5-year-old in a country that's right next door to mine, in a country that's at least as free as mine, in a country that, in a great many ways, is extremely similar to mine, not always, but a great many ways. And they never threw the British out. And it was quite a moment, one that went entirely, over my 5-year-old's head, but I've never forgotten that. This, it was quite thought-provoking.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful. I mean, again, that's the same sort of thing when you were saying, "Oh, well, we might be over here soon." I was thinking, you have to contend with Bonnie Charlie if you want to take us, and he's not going to let us go. Surely not, especially since you guys got Alaska, which was sort of a mistake. So
Well,
I
I don't
don't.
know. I mean, having the Alaskan autonomous Soviet Republic would have made the Cold War more interesting, I'll tell you.
Watch out, it can still happen.
Yeah.
And as you say, Harry, I didn't mean to be topical. I didn't mean to be topical.
The way things are right now, especially unfortunately between our two countries, I mean, how can you help it?
You have to laugh. I mean, Canada understands.
Or scream one.
Yeah, but I don't because then I need a nap again. But as I say, Canada understands that the American people are not like this, or at least most of them. And there's nothing that you can do except rally against your own government. That's all you can do.
You know,
And I think it would take a good America to have a think about what what it's doing and what it wants to do. And I think honestly, the only thing at this moment that will get Americans to rally that hard is if the price of eggs just continues to go up.
sure looks that way.
Eggs are now the number one thing smuggled across the border. So if you, Harry, you're welcome
Eggs and
anytime.
fentanyl, you've got it all.
You're welcome anytime to come take our eggs. I'll gladly give you some to go smuggle back over the border.
Okay, there you are. You're egging me on.
Yeah, I think that's a great joke to end on. That's perfect.
Okay.
Well, so Harry, is there anything else that you wanted to shop or that you wanted to promote?
I think that just about does it. I mean, look for me on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or wherever you buy your books. Buy some of mine. What the heck?
Yeah, you have many to pick from.
Yes, it's
Choose
true.
choose one.
Choose lots.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, I'll stop the recording.